Sometimes, in fact, they do the shrewd negotiation for you preemptively. As we talk about the art of shrewd negotiation, one of the main tenets is convincing the seller that some issue with their car is a way bigger deal than they think it is, and that that's somehow going to impact the rest of the market, limit your competition, and allow you to buy the car at a lower price than hopefully you can sell it to the next guy. And that can sometimes be an awkward and difficult process because people are fond of their cars and they've convinced themselves that they're worth the moon, and it can be hard to convince them that something is really that bad about them. But sometimes it isn't. Sometimes, in fact, they do the shrewd negotiation for you preemptively, and they just offer the car too cheap for sale. And that's what happened to me last week. On Tuesday morning early, I got a text from Doug Tabbitt, and he said, message this guy, tell him you'll wire money immediately and buy this car. So that sounds interesting, and there was a RenList link in the text message. RenList is a popular Porsche message board, and so I clicked on it, and there was a gorgeous 1995 Porsche 993. And it had an extensive mod list that was well documented. It looked kind of like an RS tribute car, so lots of cool little things. It looked a lot better than your normal 993. All of which have appreciated a lot in the last years because they kind of represent the last generation of the air-cooled 911. And so they've all skyrocketed in value, and I've always loved the lines of them, but I kind of assumed that they were all kind of out of reach at this point, or at least more than I could sort of justify for what the car is. But the asking price on the car was $35,000, and that was way cheaper than something that looked that good normally should be, certainly with all the stuff that was done to it. I mean, there was probably 25 or 30 grand worth of mods listed that this guy had installed during his 9 years of ownership. But the reason the car was cheap was because of a story. And I love story cars, but when I asked Doug why he didn't want the car, he said that was it. He loves selling no story cars that have no excuses, need no excuses, and like he said in a recent video, he just always advises people to buy the best car they possibly can afford. The complete opposite of my general strategy in car buying. And the story on this car was that a few months after he had bought the car in 2009, he had taken it to a PCA track event. And unfortunately, but like many 911 owners on track, he found himself sliding backwards into a tire wall. And it had broken the rear bumper and the taillights and wrinkled the fenders a little bit, done a bit of damage. And unfortunately, he didn't have track insurance, but since it wasn't a timed event, he got State Farm, his insurer at the time, to cover the car. And they had fixed the car and done a good job, and he was happy with it and continued to drive it for the next 9 years. Obviously, there was an insurance claim. It had shown up and Carfax had it. But a few years after that, after 2013, when he rechecked the Carfax, it now showed that the car was totaled. And obviously that wasn't the case. He still had the original title issued before the car had been in the accident. But there wasn't really anything he could do to clarify that. And in his head, he had blown that so far out of proportion that he undervalued the car. And he thought that the next buyer might get a salvage title when they registered it or something like that, and that this was just going to be something that just alienated all the prospective buyers from the car. And obviously he was not correct because the replies were already kind of rolling in of people who had questions about it. But I immediately sent him a message and said, hey, as long as the car is what you said it is, I want it. I'll take the car, no questions asked. I don't need a PPI. It seems like a fair price and I understand the story. In fact, it's exactly what had happened to me on a Ferrari 612 that I had for my rental car company. An accident that didn't total the car was later reinterpreted by Carfax, and they labeled it as having been a total loss. So I get the issue. I'm fine with the story. Don't worry about that. I'll make the deal easy on you. Just let me know how you want to proceed. And a couple hours later, Doug pinged me back. He said, hey, did you hear back from the seller? Did you get the car? I said, well, not yet, but I logged back into RenList, and he had sent me a message back and said, hey, I'm going through all the inquiries and everybody who's interested. Here's my email address. Let's kind of move the conversation over there. So I immediately sent him an email. I said, great, just so we're clear, I'm ready to go. The money's ready to wire. I don't need financing, no PPI. Let me know what you want to do logistically and we'll get it done. Everything will be easy. So a couple hours later, he calls me. He seems just exhausted. Obviously, he's been bombarded by inquiries and people interested. In fact, I think he said there had been 27 inquiries from people interested in the car in like the 15 hours the ad had been live, and that I was the first of 12 to have said that kind of same circumstance. I'll take the car right now. You're asking price, no questions asked, wire money now. But he did say, I want to call everybody. I owe them all that they've inquired about my car. I'm just going to go through all the emails and respond to everybody. I said, well, is there anything anyone else can say or do that puts them in front of me? Because I want the car. I want to make sure it's mine. He said, no, I just owe them the courtesy. So a couple hours later, he called me back and he said, all right, I've got through everybody. I've told them that they're not first in line, so that as long as you just do what you've said you're going to do, the car is yours. I said, terrific. So this was Tuesday late at night. I said, I'll come up tomorrow, Wednesday if you want me to. But Thursday's a little bit easier for me. He said, terrific. That's easier on me. I've got tons of stuff, all the original parts, everything that ever went with the car. I'm going to get that all boxed up and I'll have it ready. I said, all right, great. So I sent the wire the next day. He had sent me a copy of the title, his bill of sale, his driver's license, everything you'd ever want to kind of verify a used car purchase remotely. And I set out on Thursday morning with a good friend who has a 993 and he's owned a bunch of Porsches. And we drove up to the southern tip of Indiana where this car was, about 430 miles away from Atlanta. So it was a nice trip up, poured on us most of the time, but just a very exciting thing. Anytime you get a new car, it's great. And I wasn't really planning on buying a Porsche, but like I said before, you kind of have to be ready to buy a whole lot of different cars so that when something like this pops up at a deal that almost seems too good to be true, but then everything sort of checks out, you can move quickly and immediately. So I was really excited just to have something else. I am working on a deal with the Mercy, so it's going to be nice to have something as a stopgap while I work on a replacement. Regardless, it was just going to be something fun to play around with. And I was already getting bombarded by messages and emails and texts and everything else from the other down the line interested parties asking if I wanted to flip it, how much I wanted to not buy it, all these other things, because he had said who was buying the car. So I get up there and the car is immaculate. I mean, just beautiful. I was expecting, you're going to show up and the paint's really bad or it's really edgy or needs a lot of stuff. And no, the thing was just about perfect. 69,000 miles, super low miles for a 993. And no, at 35 grand, it's not the cheapest one on earth, but I thought that's what you're supposed to title videos as, like Tavares and Hoovy and all the other guys talk about their cheap finds or whatever. But if I go by Lemon's rules and I can sell the original parts or some of the other stuff off it that's extremely valuable, it certainly is cheaper than the $30,000 to $33,000 cars you can find that have a ton of miles or an automatic gearbox or are just in garbage condition. Because this thing was really, really nice, and I mean it's clearly worth 45 to 50 grand today, probably 55 to 60 if I can somehow get Carfax to change their tune about what the accident was. And the title is clean and it won't have a salvage title when I go to register it. It passed emissions easily when I got it back to Georgia, and we had just a great drive home in the car. We ran it around the block up there and threw all the stuff in the cars and just headed back, and it drove perfectly. We stopped in Nashville for the night and saw some friends and made it back to Atlanta just fine. I took it to Caffeine and Octane the other day. Everybody's really excited about it. It's got a ton of eyeball. I mean, just a fun car. Not that fast, but just a very pleasant car to be in. Just that quintessential sports car driving feel, very simple mechanically and pretty easy to work on as you need to. And amazingly, unlike almost every other 993 I've ever seen, it doesn't need a motor rebuild for unbelievable oil leaks. I mean, the motor's dry, top and bottom, and it runs just great, sounds really good, was a really nicely sorted car that he had done some more tracking in, but just had really, really gone through and kept up very nice. And he had a bunch of other Porsches, a newer GT3 Cup car, a GT4, and was just a super stand-up guy. Just did everything he said he would by the book to the T at the moment he said it was going to happen. So just a super honorable guy, exactly the kind of person you want to buy a car from. And that's what I try to do, is just be transparent, do what I say I'm going to do on both sides of a transaction. And so even when I don't have to do the shrewd negotiation myself, it was super cool to have a great car and get a good deal on it. And I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to drive it for a little while. I'll see what happens with it. Maybe I'll sell it eventually, but I see no reason to. They're not going down in value. So maybe I'll hold on to it, drive it some more, throw the keys around to some friends, and who knows, maybe we'll even give it away when we hit 1 million subscribers. I don't know yet, but tell me what you think I should do with the 993, but I can assure you I'll be out driving it and enjoying every mile.